back to the elusive story that is my pawpaw's hip surgery. So, you know all that shit going on with LSU and abuse allegations?
Yeah.
So, my pawpaw has a loud fucking mouth. We're in the waiting room, and then he looks over to me, and we're like 6 feet apart because they have everything like spread out. So
Jeez.
he's having to raise his voice because he thinks that I can't hear him, and he's like, so Christopher, and I'm like, oh my God, Jesus Christ, and he's like, you heard about all LSU in big trouble, man, big trouble, and I'm like, yep, it's a terrible thing, it's true, and then he's like, you know what I don't understand? Why do these women come forward 2 to 3 years after? And I'm like, everybody has to understand first. He has no malicious intent behind any questions. None. He's literally just...
He's innocent.
Anything that pops into his head that is a question, he asks.
Yeah.
And he'll ask anybody. It doesn't matter who they are. He talks to anybody.
He's a genuinely curious character.
Yes. So he
asked me, most people.
He asked me that, and there was like 3 women like sitting all around me, and I'm like, all right, do I shut him off completely, or do I have like my own little dialogue and podcast in this waiting room?
The latter.
So I decided to have my own mini podcast with my pawpaw, and I'm like, well,
you should have recorded this.
I'm like, well, pawpaw. Well, I was too into it at that point. I was like, well, pawpaw, there's a lot of things that go into abuse. If all this is true, it's horrible, and those women are fucking traumatized, and there's a lot that goes into not speaking up.
Right.
That he doesn't understand. So without going into details that it will take fucking forever to explain, I said that, and then he's like, yeah, I agree. And then he pauses for a second, and he's like, you know what they should do to those men if they're caught, if they're proven guilty? And I'm like, oh fuck. I'm like, what? And he's like, public castration. And I'm like, pawpaw. I'm like, whoa.
0 to 100.
Dude, he doesn't give a fuck. He's like, if that's true,
slice.
That is awful. That is despicable. And I'm like, I agree. And I'm cracking up laughing. And coincidentally, the woman that was sitting
everyone had to have thought that was funny. Everyone.
Dude, everybody was I think everybody was so like, stressed out because I was at like they're checking his heart to make sure he's like good for hip surgery.
Oh.
So everybody's there
trying to hold in the laughter.
Yeah. Everybody's there because they're fucking dealing with like some heavy heart shit. So hopefully if somebody heard our dialogue, they got a chuckle out of it. Yeah. I sure as hell did.
That was a diamond in the rough.
Dude,